We live in a culture obsessed with action, with doing, with achieving, with chasing what we want as if everything depended on our force, our movement, our urgency. But what if everything you've been told about manifestation is upside down? What if the very act of chasing what you desire is exactly what's keeping it out of reach? In the field of quantum manifestation, that mindset doesn't just fail, it repels. The universe doesn't operate in a straight line. Quantum reality doesn't respond to urgency, it responds to coherence. And coherence isn't about effort, it's about alignment. It's about your internal state reflecting the life you say you want. Most people try to attract abundance while vibrating scarcity. They visualize love while radiating loneliness. They affirm freedom, but live in the frequency of fear. And the field doesn't hear words. It doesn't read your vision board or count your affirmations. It responds to your real vibration. Here's the point almost no one talks about. Manifestation doesn't happen because you asked. It happens because you became. In the language of quantum reality, the field, that infinite ocean of possibilities, doesn't move through effort. It moves through resonance. In other words, your role isn't to force, it's to tune in. It's to stop chasing and start embodying. And that's where most people get stuck. They hear phrases like, feel as if it's already done, or get into the vibration of what you want, but it feels fake, distant, impossible. The reason? They haven't yet understood the paradox. It's the state of allowing that attracts, not the act of chasing. In quantum mechanics, the famous observer effect shows that the simple act of observing changes the outcome. But that only happens when the observation is charged with true expectation, not desperation. When you observe with trust, the field collapses into form. But if you observe with fear and urgency, the wave stays a wave, a possibility, never a reality. Pause for a moment, not to blame yourself, but to notice how your energy has been communicating with the universe. Imagine you want to hear a specific song on the radio on 98.7 FM, but your dial is stuck on 88.1. No matter how much you want it, wish for it, or beg, the sound won't reach you. Not because it doesn't exist, but because you're off frequency. That's exactly how quantum manifestation works. You're not trying to make something appear out of nothing. You're trying to align with what already exists, on a vibrational frequency you haven't yet accessed. This is where science and spirituality meet. Neville Goddard spoke about living from the end, feeling now what you once imagined only as future. Joe Dispenza explains that the brain and heart must be in coherence for the quantum field to read your internal state as real. Abraham Hicks calls it entering the vortex, the point where you stop resisting and begin to receive. They're all talking about the same thing in different languages. The universe doesn't give you what you want. It responds to what you are. And do you know why that's so hard to accept? Because the ego hates simplicity. It's been taught that value only comes through effort, that transformation has to hurt, that in order to receive something, you have to fight for it. But the quantum field works in the opposite direction. The more you chase, the more you reinforce that you don't have. The more you force, the more resistance you create. The more you say, I need, the more you vibrate lack. That's why this video isn't called Complicated Quantum Manifestation. It's called Quantum Manifestation is Simple. And that's exactly why almost no one gets it. Because what's simple doesn't sell. What's simple doesn't impress. But it's in the simple that the universe moves. And it's right there, in that silent space between wanting and already being, that reality begins to collapse into form. If the outer reality is a mirror, then the question shouldn't be, how do I get what I want? But rather, what is my reality reflecting about me right now? Most people approach manifestation with a to-do list. Visualize every day, repeat affirmations, write it 10 times in your journal. And while those habits have their value, they often become just surface-level attempts to change the reflection without changing the face the mirror reflects. The quantum field doesn't respond to what you say. It responds to who you're being. And being is not a performance. It's not saying you trust while your body vibrates anxiety. It's not posting gratitude quotes while your mind replays failure scenarios. It's not repeating that you're abundant while fear makes you check your bank account every hour. Being is alignment. It's making your inner world speak the same language as the reality you want to experience. Joe Dispenza explains this with surgical clarity. Your thoughts are electrical. Your emotions are magnetic. Together, they create an electromagnetic signal you send into the field where all possibilities already exist. And this field begins to reorganize itself not based on what you want, but on what you are broadcasting right now. Let's bring this into practice. Imagine your desire is financial freedom, but you spend your day anxious, checking your balance, calculating the worst-case scenario. You're not broadcasting freedom, you're broadcasting scarcity. And the field, impartial, neutral, precise, simply responds, okay, scarcity, here's more of that. And here comes the shift. The most powerful way to change that signal isn't to chase the future, it's to feel that future now, to practice its frequency until it no longer feels like fantasy, but like a memory. Because yes, in the quantum field, that version of you already exists. It's not about creating something new, it's about collapsing the reality where you already are, all of that, through your emotional and mental resonance. And this isn't illusion. Neuroscience has already proven. When you imagine a scenario with true emotion, gratitude, love, peace, your brain starts to form circuits as if it were already happening. Do this long enough and your body believes it. And when the body believes, the field responds. Neville Goddard was saying this decades ago, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not to pretend, but to merge with it. Until that feeling becomes more real than your current situation, until your vibration says, this is it, and the universe answers, then here it is. There's a moment in the process when everything changes. You stop just imagining, and you start to embody. Visualization is no longer an escape into the future. It becomes a fusion with the now. You're no longer wishing, you're feeling as if it has already happened. And here's the detail that makes all the difference. This feeling isn't forced. It's not a performative illusion. It's a stable vibrational state that you train. Until it becomes as familiar as brushing your teeth or taking a deep breath. Joe Dispenza explains this clearly. Your body needs to get used to the future before it arrives. And the path to that is what neuroscience calls mental rehearsal with emotional charge. You imagine the life you desire with such emotional depth that your brain literally begins to rewire itself. It creates new pathways, new patterns, and more importantly, a new perception of what is normal. And this is where real magic happens. When your nervous system gets used to the future, the field no longer sees a difference between not yet and already is. Because your body stopped resisting, your mind stopped demanding proof, your vibrations stopped oscillating. Neville Goddard said, let the feeling of the wish fulfilled become more real than the circumstances. Not as an escape, but as a creative act. Not as a mental game, but as a gesture of embodied faith. And what few people understand, manifestation is not asking the universe for a favor. It's finding within yourself the version of you that already lives it and bringing it into the now. Not through force, but through resonance. And when that resonance repeats, stabilizes, takes root, the field responds, not as a miracle falling from the sky, but as the natural consequence of someone who stopped doubting and started being. There's a quiet shift that happens when you stop waiting for proof. When you no longer need signs, coincidences, or messages from the universe to believe that something is on its way. You simply know, not with your mind, but with your body, with your field, with a certainty that can't be explained. It's vibrated. That's the moment when you stop observing and become the observed. You stop searching for synchronicities and start living in sync. You no longer try to prove you're on the right path. You begin to be the right path. This is where reality starts to bend, where time seems to move differently, where opportunities appear as if they were scheduled in advance. It's not coincidence, it's coherence. In quantum physics, the observer effect shows us that reality collapses through conscious observation. But not all observation carries the same weight. Observing with faith is different from observing with fear. Observing with peace collapses. Observing with desperation paralyzes. Joe Dispenza explains, coherence between the heart and mind generates a strong, clear, magnetic signal. When that signal is clean, no noise, no contradictions, the field responds. Because it doesn't need to interpret your words. It reads your energetic signature. And that's when you begin to notice a nearly imperceptible shift. You're no longer trying to feel trust. you've become the frequency of trust. You walk into a room and your presence changes the atmosphere. You speak less, but what you say carries more weight. You move with ease, but with direction. And all of this happens not because you're trying to seem different, but because your vibration has already changed. That's the moment you stop attracting, and you start pulling reality towards you, like a silent, steady magnet. You're no longer trying to reach the desired reality. You've become the anchor that gives it a place to land. Have you ever stopped to consider that everything you desire already exists, not as a physical product, but as a living frequency, a parallel timeline pulsing somewhere in the quantum field, waiting to be chosen? The version of you who has clarity, who lives in freedom, who loves and is loved. It's not a fantasy, it's a real vibrational possibility. In quantum physics, we call this superposition. All possible realities exist simultaneously, but they only become real when observed with intention and coherence. And here's what most people don't understand. You don't turn desire into reality by thinking harder. You turn desire into reality when your observation is infused with presence, emotion, and conscious choice. When you feel the future as real before it arrives. When you vibrate as someone who already has, without begging, without faking, without doubting. That's when collapse happens. Joe Dispenza calls this coherence between mind and heart. He says, most people think one thing, feel another, and do a third, and the field doesn't know what to respond to. The result, unstable frequency, weak signal, confusing message, and a reality that keeps spinning in place. But when you start living in coherence, everything changes. Your mind thinks, it's already mine. Your heart feels gratitude as if it's already happening. Your body acts as if it already lives that version. And the field, which never judges, only reflects, mirrors it back into form. Want to understand this biologically? Every time you feel true gratitude, your body releases dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. These neurotransmitters aren't just pleasant sensations. They are biochemical signals that completely shift your state of being. And your state of being is your point of attraction. Neville Goddard said, "Your emotional assumptions shape the outer world." And today that's not just philosophy, it's neuroscience, it's physics, it's the electromagnetic field. You're not trying to convince the universe, you're stabilizing a vibration that makes it impossible for the field to ignore you. You're no longer in doubt, you're in resonance. And when that happens, the impossible loses its grip, the improbable starts to take form, and life stops being an anxious waiting. To become a living mirror of what you've chosen to be. This is the point where most people give up, because it's easy to tap into the frequency for a few minutes. During a meditation, a visualization, a song that gives you chills. For a moment, you feel, it's already mine. But then, the day begins. The bills show up, notifications explode, the world pulls you back, and almost without noticing, you return to your usual frequency. You plant the seed, but the next day, you dig up the soil to check if it's growing. And by doing that, you interrupt the process. You disrupt the field. Manifestation is not an event. It's an energetic maintenance. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands a consistent return to alignment. Joe Dispenza speaks often about this. The difference between those who manifest and those who just wish isn't intensity. It's emotional repetition with intention. It's returning to the "it's already mine" frequency so many times that your body stops resisting, your mind stops sabotaging, and the field finally responds with clarity. It's not about grand gestures, it's about small choices. The way you speak about yourself, how you act in the face of fear, how you breathe when no one is watching. These micro movements are signals to the field, and they all add up. Each time you choose presence over distraction, gratitude over lack, certainty over doubt, you reinforce your vibrational signature. Neville Goddard said, "It is in the persistence of imagination that the invisible becomes visible." In other words, you don't visit this new identity, you move into it. And do you know what starts to happen when that vibration stabilizes? The so-called coincidences become normal. Someone says exactly what you were thinking. A door opens where there was once only a wall. You feel a kind of calm certainty, not that it will happen, but that it is already happening. And that's the sign. You stopped asking for proof, and you became the proof. Something very subtle, and at the same time profound. happens when you stop seeing manifestation as a prize to be earned and begin to see it as a natural extension of who you've become. In this state, the external world remains the same, but your interpretation of it shifts entirely. What once felt like an obstacle now feels like a transition. What once triggered fear now awakens presence, because your frequency no longer wavers. It has become your point of origin, and this is where a new awareness settles in. You no longer need reality to validate you, because your vibrational coherence has become evidence enough. You're not waiting for a partner to feel loved. You're not waiting for money to feel abundant. You're not waiting for success to feel worthy. You already embody those states, and because of that, they begin to find you. Joe Dispenza calls this energetic authorship. When you stop being a spectator of your life and begin to inform the field with your stable vibration, you stop reacting to the world, and the world begins to respond to you. Neville Goddard said, "You don't walk toward the end, you walk from it." You live as if the desire were already a fact, and reality, as it always does, adapts to your conviction. Manifestation stops being something magical and becomes inevitable, not because you forced it, but because you stop doubting. And then something curious happens. You no longer need to control the how. You don't need to know when or through which path. Anxiety gives way to the steady serenity of someone who isn't waiting, but allowing. You're no longer chasing the ideal reality. You've become compatible with it. And when that happens, the world has no choice. It begins to precisely reflect what you consistently vibrate, because frequency doesn't lie, and yours already says it all. Have you ever experienced that strange yet magical moment when everything simply clicks? The right person shows up. The answer comes before you even ask. Opportunities appear from places that once felt closed, and you think, was it luck? But deep down, you know, it was alignment. This is the point where you're no longer trying to manifest. You're allowing the field to organize itself around your new frequency. And this isn't magic. It's physics. It's biology. It's pure vibration. Joe Dispenza explains that when you enter elevated emotional states like gratitude, love, enthusiasm, your brain and heart enter gamma coherence. In this state, the nervous system opens, intuition heightens, time seems to speed up, and life begins to move, as if it's responding directly to your vibration. You start to notice a new pattern. Ideas come before doubt. Answers arise before the question. The world moves with you, not against you, because you've become the anchor point of a new reality. Neville Goddard said, "The assumptions you sustain with emotion shape the structure of your world." And that's exactly what begins to happen. You stop wrestling with matter and start communicating with the field. It's subtle, but you feel it. Coincidences become more obvious. Repeating numbers show up like confirmations. The path that once felt distant is now right beneath your feet. You're no longer forcing the future to arrive. You're meeting it in the present. And the most beautiful part of all, you stop being impressed by the extraordinary, because it becomes natural, not because it got easier, but because it got aligned. And the universe, which once seemed random, now feels organized, intimate, and attuned. It's at this point that manifestation stops being a goal and becomes a rhythm of life. Maybe the real question was never, when will it happen? But rather, when will you stop waiting? Because the version of you who already lives the life you desire, she's not under construction. She already exists, and the only thing separating the two of you is a vibration, a frequency, a choice you can make right now. It's not about having more faith or repeating more affirmations. It's about embodying what your soul already knows. You're not trying to convince the universe, you're finally speaking its language. And do you know what that language is? Coherence. Not perfection, not performance, but real presence between what you feel, think, vibrate, and choose. Joe Dispenza would say, "You don't need more evidence, you need to be the evidence." And Neville Goddard would add, "You don't manifest what you want, you manifest what you assume to be true." And if you feel this now, not as a pretty idea, but as a deep inner recognition, then maybe this isn't just content. Maybe it's a mirror, a reminder that you're not becoming someone new. You're simply returning to who you've always been, without the noise, without the rush, without the doubt. So take a breath, a deep one, and ask yourself, if I already had everything I desire, how would I move through today? How would you speak? How would you treat yourself? How would you open your door, answer the phone, say good morning? Now, do that. Not tomorrow, not when everything aligns. Now, because in this exact moment, you have the chance to emit a new signal. And when that signal becomes consistent, reality has no choice but to meet you there. If this resonated, type 777 in the comments. Not as superstition, but as a vibrational declaration. A reminder to yourself and to the field, I stopped chasing, I started being. And as others do the same, you'll realize you're not alone. We are a field, a flow. A wave of souls who stopped seeking proof and began to live as the signal itself. You're not learning how to manifest. You're remembering how reality responds to your vibration. And when you stop chasing, life begins to find you.